to skip, that's kind of the grade school, middle school to high school. And through that time, I developed a hatred and an emptiness inside because there was nobody there. And I built really good relationships with my mother's boyfriends that showed me things that they should have never showed me. So the evil in my life and the depression, the emptiness, it increased to the time when I was about ninth grade, and I got introduced to narcotics and the harder stuff. And that's when my life kind of changed for the worse, but not really out of control. I was able to sell these things for a long while, for a good while of time, and I made a lot of money. And around 18 years old, I no longer used the drugs. The drugs were by far using me. I was so evil, so lost. I couldn't hold a job because of my attitude. And every little business in Fairmont I worked there, I quit or got fired because of my attitude. He wasn't going to tell me what to do. I was a drug addict, and I just had the mentality of, I don't need this job. Most of the time, my first few jobs in the beginning of my life was a cover-up. I needed a job in order to hustle. I needed a job because the cops, they want to know, where's the 18-year-old get the nice car? I work at McDonald's. So by the time I graduated high school, I was so lost. And this is when things got worse for me. And I skipped a lot of things. I want to get to the after Christ. I have to tell you BC first. I have to tell you before Christ. So around 18 years old, 19 years old, my buddy came in from out of town. And we were actually in another town, and we were walking down a main street. And we seen some guys. It was a bad neighborhood. We seen some guys. There was a drug deal going down. And he said, "Hey, you got your pistol?" And I said, "Yeah." And he got it. He cocked it. He went over. He laid everybody down. He took everything they had. We left. We went to the house. We got high. Took the money. Took everything. Got high. He went back to his hometown, his state town, and I kind of picked up where he left off. That's when I seen a way out of. You can't hustle real well when you have an addiction. It just didn't work. I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about. It just don't work. So I learned how to manipulate situations to get people where I wanted them, to stick them up. And at that time in my life, I figured they can't even go to the cops because they shouldn't have what they had. What are they going to do? Call the cops and say, "Hey, I got robbed for my drugs"? So I did this for a good while in my life. And my life was crazy. It was crazy, and I don't have time to really give you details. I want to get to Jesus because I know there's people here that need to know that a relationship with Jesus Christ is real. So me and my cousins were in a house one night. This is the first time an entity spoke to me. I didn't credit God, didn't know anything about Jesus, God. We planned to go and get this guy in a different town, different state. And it's because we knew him, we knew when stuff was coming, we knew exactly where it was. It was a lot of stuff. On the way out of the house, basically, I felt like a sick feeling. If I can explain it, there was such a sick feeling in my stomach, right at the door. And I remember telling my cousins, like, "Hey, something's wrong." We sat down, we looked at our notebook because we were strategic. We looked at the way in, we looked at the way out, we looked at the drive back. Everything was smooth, but I didn't feel right. So they argued with me for a while. I took the bullets out of the gun, gave them the gun, I said, "Go." "I'm not going. I'm taking the bullets. Go." To make a long story short, I didn't hear from them for about 2 hours. They came back. My buddy was cut on the forehead, sweating, all messy. My other two cousins were yelling at this guy. What happened was when they got in the house, the guy instantly grabbed the gun, wrestled away from my cousin, put it to the girl's head that was involved, and pulled the trigger. And that's the story that I got back when they came. At that time, I wasn't even focused on what they were telling me. I was focused on God. Somebody just did something, and it influenced me big time. It didn't change me. I felt like I had I felt like I had a power. Like, man, I got away with that one. That's smooth. So I continued with this life, and I was in situations where, just to pass real quick, I was in situations where I should have been dead, overdosed. My mother had to come and pull me out of bathtubs twice, cold water ice baths twice. And I was out. Too much drugs mixed, too many hard drugs. And I'm alive. I didn't overdose because of God's mercy. But so I got into a really bad situation when I was about 23 years old. My girlfriend was pregnant with my son, and he's lived all of this with me. He's heard stories, so I'm not shy to share in front of him. She was pregnant with my son. I tried to go to the military. We were at war. They wouldn't take me because of my neck and my knuckles. I wanted to run. I couldn't be a dad. I was scared to death to be a dad. So I ran. I went to South Dakota to my cousin's house in South Dakota. And I got a good job. I was doing good for about 3 months. Found a connect, relapsed. And it was bad. I was waking up in towns 2 hours from my house. I didn't know where I was in South Dakota. His mother and him, they were at home. He was born. He was at home. I was just the everything that comes along with the lifestyle of being an addict. So it got cold. I was the first one to get laid off, of course, because of my work ethic, my attitude. I took my last check and came back home. At this time, I had a tattoo on my face that I burnt out with a soldering iron because of the dark meeting. I didn't want him to see it, so I'm scarred up. My face, it was horrible. Everybody back here in my hometown knew who I was. And I've had cops say, man, you're better off dead. Arrest me, handcuff me, you're better off dead, Hall, throw me in a car. So I had this label that I wore over myself, that I was no good, I was a drug addict. I had the labels, I was bipolar, I was learning disorder, I had all these lies. And so Proverbs says, as man believeth in the heart, as a man believes in his heart, so he is. So I believed in my heart, I believed these lies about me. So if I hate myself, it's easy to hate you. I live a life of hatred. I was evil. My cousin came in from South Dakota with his friend, Corey Morris. You don't mind me saying his name. He changed my life. He brought me to Jesus, and Jesus changed my life. They invited me to a basketball game on a Sunday. Saturday, I got slammed. I woke up Sunday. I'm hungover. I'm not going. My cousin was a big guy. He came. He roughed me up. I went. I got in a car with these Christians. My cousin wasn't. He was kind of online like, Ronnie, you need help, man. He's seen what I did in South Dakota. You need help. I got in a car with these Christians, and I knew they were Christians because I knew one of them that got saved, Corey. I knew Corey used to run the streets with me, and now dude was crazy for Jesus. Crazy. I mean, not know I go to church on Sunday. The man loved Jesus every day. And so I'm around these guys, and Matthew says, Christians, believers, we are the light of the world. And that's the only way I can put it into words. I was around these people, and I felt their joy. I seen their smiles. It was a pure atmosphere. It was absolutely nothing evil, no hip-hop, however you say it. They weren't hypocrites. Not a single word about church from these guys. Not a single word about church. Scar on my face, covered in tattoos. They knew who I was. They told me about Jesus this whole time. Every conversation went back to Jesus. Every one. And it freaked me out that I'd seen somebody sold out for Jesus. They didn't play church. They didn't tell me you need to go to church. They didn't say nothing but Jesus loves you, man. Man, if you could just look, I remember Corey saying, if you just look into his eyes, man, you'll fall in love. And I thought he was crazy. But it took somebody crazy for Jesus to touch my life. Because I knew Christians in school, in high school. I knew Christians that went to church, and Ronnie, you need to go to church. All this stuff. None of them told me about the love of God. None of them. I wasn't going to church. I was covered in tattoos, scar on my face. Actually, the first time I went to a church, somebody in the congregation went to the pastor and said, you know who that is? He don't even need to be in this building. So that was my experience with Christians that I seen in church. But I heard about Jesus from these people, and he enticed me with Jesus. He enticed me with the goodness of God. He enticed me with the love of God. He enticed me, and we built a relationship, and he started coming to the gym with me. And now I look back, and it wasn't to get in shape. It was to minister to me. He was a little scrawny dude, man. He was a pretty boy. He would come to the boxing gym with me, and the whole time he would encourage me, and he would speak life over me. And so eventually, my neighbor would always ask me to come to church. And eventually, Corey's ministering to me here. This is how God uses people, never gives up on anybody. Eventually, my neighbor came over. And he said, man, you're not going to come to church. So I'm coming over here. And he bring the Bible with him. I had alcohol. I had liquor on the table. And I had my pills. And I was kind of testing him. I mean, I was just prideful. I'm going to see what he says about he came to my house. I'm going to see what he says. And he sat down. And he didn't acknowledge anything that was on the table. And he opened that little brown leather book that I thought was for old people. And he started sharing a message about Jesus walking on water. But he explained how, I remember he looked at me, he said, how do you begin to sink? Because it says Peter began to sink. And I said, I don't know. He said, go step go step in water tomorrow and see if you begin to sink. And I thought about it. I said, it's impossible. I'm going to fall straight to the ground. And he said, this is what happens, man. He was looking at Jesus. And when he looked away, he began to sink. But he stayed close enough to reach out to Jesus' hand, and Jesus pulled him up out of that. And I remember that message, and I remember thinking in my mind, drinking, popping. I remember thinking, I got to learn what's in that book. It's not just for old people. I remember thinking that. So I started reading. I didn't understand a word of it. I'm reading it, and I'm watching church, because church helped explain what I'm reading to me. I didn't understand it. I was reading it to understand it with my brain. It's not meant for your brain. Scripture's meant for your heart. And I didn't know that. So I'm reading it, and I'm trying to understand these things. And I'm building a relationship with Corey, and this guy's asking me to go to church, and I didn't want nothing to do with church. So eventually I go to church. And I go to church messed up. It was a little country church where they don't even sing, they clap. And I've always kind of had a hard head, like I'm going. You know, if you don't want me to go like this, don't invite me. He said, come on. And I went. And I'll never forget, the preacher looked at me, and he looked right at me. He said, I had a good message planned for today, but I feel the Lord bringing me somewhere else. And he shared about David and Goliath and giants that we faced. And in my life, addiction was a giant. My relationship with my mother was a giant. My father not being there was a giant. My mother's addiction was a giant. My mother was married into a biker gang. She was married into one of the upper guys in a biker gang. So the parties, the cake parties, the guns, the bikes in the living room, it was all a giant to me that I just wanted to escape. And I remember thinking, this is what I remember thinking, drugs aren't my problem. God gave me that revelation. I'm a drug addict, but drugs aren't my problem. I don't know Jesus. And the drugs are just numbing that. And I remember thinking that, and I got up and I said, hey man, can you come to the altar with me? It was altar call. And he said, come on. And by the time I got half